You brought out the Google problem, by the way, but it's obvious that he didn't consider this. He just got really lucky, in my opinion. However, I believe that if you own Apple now, you must accept the $20 billion that Google provides you annually, which is a 99% margin. If this antitrust decision against Google is upheld, you should also definitely think about the value of Apple without that $20 billion. Depending on the multiple you choose to apply to that $20 billion, that alone may be worth anywhere from $500 billion to $1 trillion. The absurd thing is that Apple is still up at 214, which is 11 to 12% higher than it was at 185 at the beginning of the year. The stock is only slightly off its all-time highs, having just recently risen to $230 a share. With Apple owning more than $100 billion in cash and Buffett controlling almost $300 billion, this is an impressive amount of money that both companies own. He clearly has a better trade on this, whether it's the 5% he will receive on the $300 billion or perhaps something he wants to purchase. Allocators prefer to make trades. That's an additional possibility. Well done for bringing this all to a close. Now let's turn to the federal judge who decided that Google has an unlawful monopoly in search and advertising. This is very significant news, possibly the most significant development in the tech sector in a few years. A judge decided Monday that Google had violated the law in order to keep its monopoly on internet searches. As you recall, this was submitted in 2020 during the Trump administration. According to the 277-page verdict, Google paid billions of dollars to third-party platforms like Apple and Samsung to be their default search engine, abusing its monopoly in the search industry. The way they keep the monopoly is more important than simply having it. Traffic acquisition cost, or TAC, is something we've talked about here a lot. The lawsuit claims that Google handles over 90% of all web searches. Although the business contests that assertion, I believe we are all aware of it. Remedies for Google's actions are not yet included in the ruling. It will be decided in a later decision. Google will undoubtedly resist this. They may no longer be able to pay for Firefox and Samsung to be the default search engine, which could lead to a change in business operations. That will open up a lot of intriguing options. This is very important news, and Chamath and I were talking about them on X. The search engine market may benefit greatly from this. I know from my time building Mahalo, a human-powered search engine over 10 years ago. When I sent it to Steve Jobs, he opened it up in the middle of the night and started playing with it. Due to their tense connection with Google, there were numerous reviews, or rather, rumors, that Apple wanted to go into the search industry. Steve Jobs was extremely displeased when Google and Android began to compete. Additionally, Google developed Chrome, a rival to Safari. Therefore, I don't think it's impossible that Apple will launch their own search engine after losing this $30 billion contract for TAC. Both Brave and DuckDuckGo have crawlers and fantastic search engines and APIs. Unbeknownst to most, Apple has a crawler. My guess is that, like Amazon, Uber, and other businesses, Apple will grow its advertising network by purchasing a search engine and going it alone. What do you think about this, and what do you think will happen next? What effects will this decision have on the downstream market, and will it stand? The Google case, in my opinion, is the most significant development in technology since the Microsoft DOJ ruling about Internet Explorer in 2000. Yes, since the consent agreement from 2000 effectively hamstrung this extremely restrictive firm for over 10 years while many advances took place. I take it that they missed two enormous waves. Due in large part to the consent agreement, Microsoft effectively lost out on social media and then on mobile. Amazingly, they eventually caught up and embraced SaaS and the cloud. However, the smaller result is simply a consent decree that places Google in handcuffs for a certain number of years. In the absence of such a decree, new businesses might not have been able to thrive, but this leads to a couple of significant waves of innovation. The AI-powered search experiences that we are beginning to see, whether they are from OpenAI, Perplexity, or some of these other players, are a good illustration of this. If you go back to the Bell type of situation, where the corporation is divided up, the bigger result is more. In my opinion, the likelihood of that happening is very low. Thus, you can confidently rule out the larger outcome. It will be a smaller result, I believe. The objective The objective is that this judge will have power over a variety of options. And since it begins to set the tone for meaningfully and productively checking big tech, I believe that both Democrats and Republicans will embrace whatever occurs here, not necessarily because they have a grudge against Google. In Washington, this has significant implications. This morning's new reading from the chips, due to the high demand for its AI chips, Taiwan Semi recorded a 45% increase in revenue in July over the same month the previous year. Despite being a significant outperformer for the year, shares are fluctuating along the flat line here. Nvidia, one of its major clients, has seen its stock plummet this week. Although it just had its greatest day of the month, the company's market capitalization has decreased by around $1 trillion since mid-June when it was at its peak. Let's discuss that name and other semis in more detail. Stacy Raskin from Bernstein is now joining us. It's always nice to have you around, Stacy. Now let's talk about Nvidia. This week, there was some news about delays that might have been caused by Blackwell's design flaws. What will it imply, and is it real? Yes, it appears enough real. Enough smoke is present to indicate that there is a fire. Others in the supply chain have confirmed it to us, and Supermicro made reference to it, so it appears to be genuine. It appears to be a minor design flaw rather than a serious one. It appears like they may have already resolved the issue. We may be delayed by 2 to 3 months. In actuality, this implies that those who were expecting actual volume shipments in calendar Q4 may instead see them in Q1. It's a minor push-out. Keep in mind that even Nvidia is not immune to this kind of difficulty. Hyperscale CapEx recommendations that are still increasing have taken this problem into account in the interim. Hopper, Nvidia's current design, is in high demand, and it appears that the company is stepping up production to tide things over until Blackwell, perhaps a quarter later, emerges in volume. I do not believe it to be a major structural problem. It's obvious that sentiment has affected the stock. Several factors have affected the stock, including a broad decline in attitude toward AI as people start to doubt ROI. Additionally, it is burdened by this problem. However, I don't believe Nvidia has changed structurally. We had a slight push-out, but I believe everything will work out. As you say, there is still demand. What about the stock itself? How enticing is it given its multiple? Even at its height, Nvidia was around 40 times projected profits, and the sell-side figures are probably too low. The company has never been that costly. It's actually not that expensive. 40 times is roughly its 5-year median. It's likely 30 times forward now. Even if a delay is announced, everyone is aware of it by now because we have decreased the risks heading into the back half. Since demand is still high, volumes are carried over to the following year, improving the appearance of that year. Here, the valuation is still appealing. Hey Stacy, Applied Materials reports next, although I know you don't cover this name. I do, in fact, cover Applied Materials. I made a mistake. As we move to the second half of the year, what are you keeping an eye on, and how much of an indication does it serve for the larger semi-space? There are several items. People are keeping an eye on China's robust semiconductor capex demand. We'll keep an eye out for that because Applied Materials is one of the few businesses that led their China mix to fall in the second half. Since many of their counterparts receive more than 50% of their revenue from China, they are less concerned about the China overbuild than others. By the end of the year, Applied anticipates this to fall to a low of 30%. Concern was also raised by Intel's recent capital drop to $26 billion, although I had to increase my previous projections of Intel's capex for this year from $24 billion to $26 billion. My current estimate is $21 billion for next year. Thus, a slight decrease, but nothing alarming.